Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished educator who I've had the privilege to work with at IIM Rohtak, Professor Venkatesh Murthy. Venkatesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Garg. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Professor Murthy is the Assistant Professor for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at IIT Jodhpur. And as I mentioned earlier, he was formerly at the Indian Institute of Management, Rohtak. So let's talk a little bit about innovation and entrepreneurship at IIT Jodhpur. And my first question to you is, how are the MBA programs different at IIT and IIM, considering that you have taught in both places?
Yeah, so very interesting question to start with. While IIMs focus on business and management education solely, IITs have an opportunity to blend the management and business education with in-house and a deep technology knowledge.
Okay.
And what also happens is several engineering and science departments at the IITs offer very complementary courses and which are very useful for business and management students to take up. And to our surprise, several of our students have been showing a lot of inclination to take courses from across engineering and science departments. Particularly also the Industry 4.0, the trend that we have been noticing is that the industry expects management graduates to have a deep appreciation for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and various other techno-managerial applications. I think from that point of view, I would say the MBAs from IITs will have an ever-increasing edge over MBAs from other institutions, typically because such experiments, intermingling of management and business education with the technology is only possible in an ecosystem such as IIT. So therefore, probably the institutions will continue to have an edge.
Amazing. So is it also a requirement then that people who get admission into the MBA program at IIT should all be with a technical background or an engineering background?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. In fact, if you look at our composition, we have 70% of the engineers and 30% of them are non-engineers. So our core program remains Tech MBA. In fact, our MBA program itself is rebranded as Tech MBA. We do emphasize on intermingling of technology with management and business learnings. So the specialization, sort of kicks in the second year of the program. In the first year, students study most general courses, but in the second year, students take two different paths. A large chunk of them go in the tech domain, specializing and studying more of techno-managerial courses and application of technology into management domains and so on. And some would go in the traditional MBA path.
Amazing. So, I remember you pioneered entrepreneurship, including the incubator Wisdom at IIM Rohtak. What is the scope of the work of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship program at IIT Jodhpur?
Yeah, so the scope has been of multifold. One being traditionally we are expected to work with the doctoral scholars and then ensure that we will have a very, very productive and successful doctoral scholars coming out of this center per se, entrepreneurship and innovation. And going forward, we also are expected to run successful programs, not just at the postgraduate level, at the undergraduate level. So we have introduced something called Minors in Entrepreneurship last year for the third year and fourth year of BTechs. And this year we could see as almost a 300% increase in the interest amongst BTechs to coming forward to study entrepreneurship programs. We were quite amazed. We were not expecting such a sudden outburst of numbers. To my surprise, what I realized is at this age, at the undergraduate level, students are working on their BTech projects and they are trying to convert some of their ideas into a possible venture. And they are looking at certain key insights. And this is where Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center comes in and then provides those insights. And going forward, also, we do work with incubators who come into the incubator. We have a very vibrant incubator at the institute called TISC, that is a Technology Incubator and Startup Center, where Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center provides insights to all the incubators who come on board. And we continue to work with postgraduate and undergraduate students to also help them think through entrepreneurship possibly. And more so, our focus has been on case-based teaching. So we want to take the entrepreneur's real experience as they have gone through, such as yours, and then we want to share it with students. We want to provide them those insights so that some of them can think through that and then internalize it over the years.
Very fascinating. So, four decades ago, I remember when I did my MBA, the objective was to just get a good job. Today I find a lot of the young MBA students want to learn about startups and entrepreneurship, and you just mentioned. What has changed and why?
So one thing is, this is what even I kind of at times get, find it quite amazing. Whenever in whatever the forum, we talk to any group of students, be it engineering students and MBA students, most of them tend to talk about aspiring to becoming an entrepreneur. And suddenly it looks like as if 100% of them are gearing up to becoming entrepreneurs. Though that is not the case. Some people tend to just brush it aside by saying that these are just nomenclatures. Students are tossing them around to gain brownie points. But to me, that is not the case. To me, that is an overall attitudinal change in this young crop of students. That is because of the kind of trend that the US has gone through over the years. And also that's partly because of the media that has made all the information possible or available for the young crop of students. They access this information and they draw those insights and they tend to think, what if I can be one of them, like say Elon Musk, for example. So at least that imagination is taking a shape. If not all of them becoming entrepreneurs, I could certainly say at least 5% of them at some point in their life will take a shot at entrepreneurship in some form or the other. That's a fascinating change I could sense.
Quite amazing. But tell me, one of the reasons a lot of entrepreneurship has succeeded in America is because of the incredible infrastructure and the incredible ideas and thoughts available at Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
What role does the government need to play to be able to provide us such infrastructure?
So, well, it is not just infrastructure. Besides infrastructure, to my understanding, the very way the US opened up in the post-1960s, so there has been a lot of social transformation that happened, particularly accepting the racial differences, accepting the cultural differences as one amongst them. I think became a hallmark of a changing and an open society. I think to that extent, societies have evolved over the years. And India has always been in a society with diversity, embracing all changes. I don't think we need to learn those insights from anybody else. We already have them deep inside with such a diversity very well inbuilt into us. And what government has to do is to probably provide enough incentives to the existing academic institutions and also resources, so that these academic institutions can further provide those resources to those students and those aspiring entrepreneurs. Instead of controlling the resources at their end and then expecting someone to come and approach for it and then going through all sets of bureaucracy, maybe government should just enable all the academic institutions to take care of entrepreneurship to sort of take a shape in the near future.
Fascinating. And again, based on a lot of the research and study that you do on startups and entrepreneurship, what, according to you, are some of the reasons why startups fail?
Yeah, two fundamental reasons. I think I don't think it does require a genius to decode that. One of them being the poor execution. So they have a brilliant idea, and this is what we have been looking at. In fact, if you remember, a series of business plans that we reviewed,
Correct.
almost 200 plus business plans,
Mm.
and we could see all of them being such great ideas. But at the end of the day, probably one of them might have been executed and not all of them. So the
Correct.
execution is the fundamental. And the second thing is uh, not identifying a right pain point of the people.
Mm.
And in fact, one of our own incubators, the former incubators, was telling us this, that our product was sort of a good to have kind of a product. It
Mm.
was not that it was essential for an individual to have it on their phone
Mm.
in the form of an app. So they might just choose to have it, and they might just do away with it. So that means not really being able to identify a proper pain point, and also poor execution. To me, these two are the standard reasons why enterprises fail
Well
too
said.
often.
Well, poor execution, you're so right. It is such a major problem for a lot of startups.
True, true,
That's
true,
so
true.
moving on, institutions like IIT Jodhpur, which are supporting entrepreneurship, what role can such leading institutions play to promote entrepreneurship in India?
Oh yes, at three levels. IIT Jodhpur has already positions itself as one of the catalysts to provide all kinds of incentives to the entrepreneurs. One is its incubator. It's called TESC, Technology Incubator and Startup Centers,
Mhm.
has already been recognized and supported by MSME, the Government of India. And the incubator is also exploring multiple options to generate resources to provide those resources to the incubators who are likely to come in.
Mhm.
That is one. The entire focus of the incubator is a deep technology. They want to go deep into the technology domain, and then work on those very fundamental technological innovations.
Hmm.
And the second aspect of it is the institute has very clearly created something called interdisciplinary research programs. And one of them, very fascinating one, is in alliance with AIMS Jodhpur,
Mhm.
All India Institute of Medical Sciences
Right.
Jodhpur,
Right.
where we are trying to, we have already launched a program. The program is about, it's called Smart Healthcare.
Mhm.
The students of this program will earn both master's and a PhD degree. But the earning of master's and PhD degree doesn't just come because they write and produce a thesis or a write-up. Instead, they are expected to produce a patentable idea.
Wow.
That means there is an interesting combination that the institution has tried to create between the medical domain and the technology domain. So they want to produce as many technologies as possible out of this new adventure. So this is probably one of its kind in the country right now. And there are such similar interdisciplinary research programs. So in a way, it has become the IIT Jodhpur has become a melting pot for multiple sensibilities and ideas coming together and working on.
Hmm.
And one of them is called digital humanities, perhaps a new terminology and a new way of approaching and understanding human and its interaction with the digital world. And this is also expected to sort of generate certain new ideas and then entrepreneurs over the years. And also the third aspect being the creation of innovation and entrepreneurship center as part of the School of Management and Entrepreneurship. This center is expected to provide all kinds of insights to the incubators who come onto the incubator, and also work with the larger ecosystem in providing insights to the faculty who probably have a new idea, who want to take that idea to a venture level, and also with the doctoral and master's level students.
Amazing.
So that's how the whole thing is positioned.
No, no, it's so heartening to learn about TISC, which seems to be supporting entrepreneurs so well, or
That's
potential
right.
entrepreneurs well. So
Thank
moving
you.
on, the pandemic has affected everybody, right? My question to you is, how has it affected business management in our country or at IIT Jodhpur?
Undoubtedly, the pandemic has affected all our lives in generals, and of course, big time the learning and teaching aspects. To me, first and foremost, I must, in a way, compliment all the teachers and the students all over the world who kind of figured out a way to get into this new world and a new experience altogether, which was unprecedented in the history, at least. And they've somehow figured out a way, kudos to all of them. Having said that, on the learning front, it had a huge impact because it simply took away the very face-to-face interaction, and the peer-to-peer learning, which would have been seamless and quite smooth, is out of the picture. And that is a big drawback as far as this online education is concerned. And this face-to-face interaction and networking between the students will have a long-lasting effect going forward. At maybe 10 years down the line, somebody might just connect with a group of them and then might think about exploring new avenues in life. But that is somewhat limited. Of course, they might just get along online virtually, but the effectiveness is not so much as otherwise it would have been in the physical mode. And the second aspect on the learning front, when we have a physical classroom, when we discuss a case, when we have a one-to-one interactions, the effectiveness of and internalization process is very different than when we have it online. So online, we don't even know whether somebody is listening to what we say. That becomes completely an impersonalized world. And if it is an executive education, it is understandable. So executives have voluntarily chosen to study online, and they're okay to do that, and they somewhat committed to do that. And that's executive education do run online more. Whereas for MBAs who come, most of them are fresh students. For example, we have almost 50% of students are fresh graduates right out of the college, and who may not really have that seriousness to commit themselves for an online learning, where the teacher is not even visible anywhere. So it really has impacted their learning process in a big way.
Very interesting. So my next question to you is that, one of the challenges that institutes of higher learning seem to have all over the country is that we are not producing enough PhD students. We are not spending enough money on research. What are your thoughts on how can this be changed?
Yes, very, very important and the most fundamental of all. A small figure tells us a big picture of where we stand. We have been producing doctoral scholars in about 20,000 in each year, compared to the US, which produces doctoral scholars or PhDs in 60,000. Wow. So that's the stark difference. Almost 3 times more than our PhDs. There are 2 broad issues. One is the quantity, the number of PhDs who are coming out of the institutions. Though we have close to 900 universities, we are not really producing enough. And at the same time, the quality is another issue. There was an article in Hindu that talked about earning abilities or earning possibilities for a doctoral scholar after coming out of an education institution. They looked at some of the probably close to 6,000 PhDs, and their earnings were much lower than anybody who had not even done undergraduation. So this at times becomes a discouraging factor for several bright minds to come forward and then join a program like doctoral program. So then it becomes a program that caters to only maybe an ordinary set of students who really do not wish to pursue their career, want to find an alternative, and then they come and join in. And of course, some of them succeed, some of them do really very well once they get into a program, once they get the right direction and right coursework particularly. But several of them fail to produce an internationalizable academic work. and mostly their work remains ordinary in the sense. So then their career possibilities also get limited. So all of that put together, there is a huge limitation. So there are funding avenues available. We have, for example, UGC offers funding avenues such as JRF, Junior Research Fellowship, and so on. And of course, if you look at the education spending of Government of India and other state governments, it's really not enough. So if you look at some of the developed countries, they do spend much more than what we spend. So we need to also increase on that front. And by doing so, what we can do is we can actually stop several of our bright minds going out of the country. We can hold them back in our own institutions. Correct. Perhaps these bright minds might become those bright, teachers and thinkers over the years. So I think that brain drain is one of the things. When they go abroad, go to Europe, US, and other countries, they do very well. They settle down, they get jobs there, and they do very well there. But we back in India do suffer from quality PhDs. Yeah.
Very well said. So I'm now going to move to the last segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you personally. Sure. All our viewers and listeners love to get to know a little more about our guest. Yeah. So my first question to you is, in academia for so long, and yet so young, what would you say are 3 key milestones in your life or your career?
Yeah, so to me, one of the key milestones, I don't know whether I really should call it a milestone, still I'm yet to get there, but looking at whatever has little happened, I think getting into an institute like a premier institute like Tata Institute of Social Sciences was probably one of the best things that has happened to me outside. So I think that's one key large extent. And the second aspect is back in Rohtak. Catering to formal education, cater some basic education. And the third element of being a pioneer educational brands in India, one being IIM and the other being IIT, is very, very satisfying. And hopefully I'll be able to do as much as I could.
Amazing. So I have time for 2 more questions for you. And I'm going to have to select what to ask you. But my next question is, who or what inspires you to keep doing so many new things?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Thank you. I think early on I read Mahatma Gandhiji's autobiography, My Experiment with Truth.
Yeah.
Was quite an inspiring one to me, because in that book, Gandhiji somewhat tells us quite in a subtle way that every challenge that we face in our life and every pain that we go through in our life is a learning in itself. So do allow yourself to be part of that experience, and do not try and develop an aversion to those painful experiences. Instead, allow yourself to swim through them. I think that is one interesting thing. And more, and other than that, I think a lot of the Kannada literature, I think that's where I come from. In fact, I grew up reading a lot of Kannada literature. And one interesting thing is that we've got a very rich tradition of literature in Kannada. I think authors like Ananthamurthy and Girish Karnad, Kuvempu, Dara Bendre, a lot of them are Kannada writers, and Shivarama Karanth. All of them inspired me so much, and then gave me so much confidence that I could write. I'd write by the time I get to undergraduation. I could somewhat sense that I could start writing, but I hardly knew that I would start writing in English, and that too research papers, and not so much in Kannada. So that's one probably a small gap I have found in myself.
No, what I was going to ask you was that my last question to you, and this is that you work with a lot of young MBA students. What is your advice to them as they start their life in the corporate world or as an entrepreneur?
Yes. So this is probably, some might not find it interesting, because this sort of goes against what Adam Smith said long ago, that each individual being too self-centric and then being focused on what he or she wants adds up to the overall well-being of the nation. So in my view, I keep telling my students here as well, stop thinking about your own career, your own future prospects, your own possibilities of settling down. Think about rest of the world. This whole universe is yours. So we all belong to this large universe. Our family is not just ours. Every other family is also ours. Every other individual is also ours. So if you can probably have that deep insight and a perspective in us, perhaps we start thinking for others and start building certain programs, certain activities, certain ventures for others. Maybe that is where you will find a sweet spot for yourself to find a sense of happiness. So instead of being too self-centered, I think we need to open up and then try and think about the world around us. Maybe we will find more happiness.
Wonderful. Professor Murthy, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege speaking to you.
Indeed, the pleasure is all mine, Mr. Garg. Thank you so much for having me with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.